I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your cattle market summary for the week ending February the 5th, where we had a stormy week in the cattle sector this week. If you remember, on Monday and Tuesday we had a big storm come in, a snowstorm, wintry type deal come in through northern Kansas and across most of Nebraska and into Iowa, clipped the northern part of Missouri there, and that's really where the rubber meets the road. It's not down in the southern plains anymore. It's up in the northern plains where you've got a lot of producers and a lot of cattle feeders up there, and we made a pretty big impact. A lot of your sale barns were shut down, ran an abbreviated run. I mean, their receipts were curtailed a bit, or maybe they postponed their sale, had it at a later time or something like that, to try to get around the storm. And it was tough on your feedlots, had to get the payloaders in there and move a lot of snow out of the way and things like that. But made it through, and by the middle of the week, and we got to the latter parts, things had pretty much turned back to normal. And that storm was kind of two-sided. On one hand, the board always loves a storm, and the board was supportive early in the week, then kind of tailed off there towards the end of the week with the support failed out a little bit. But also your storm kind of propped up your box beef cutout values, and they were a little bit more supportive than what we had thought. We thought they would continue to fall this week, and they really didn't, because we had curtailed kill in your packing plants, because a lot of those are in the northern plains too, and your box beef trade knew that, so they went ahead and placed their orders and bought some cuts and held that market up. But at the same time, your fat cattle negotiated trade was not very strong, because they knew that the kill had been curtailed a little bit, and they weren't going to need as many cattle. They had a big trade last week, late in the week, so we didn't have a lot of support in the cash market on your fat cattle sales. On the board, your live cattle futures on February contract on Friday were down 102 to end the week at 136.05, which was up 75 cents for the week. Feeder cattle on the March contract was down $2.70 to end the week at 153.82, which was down $3.43. And that's really what we're seeing. We've seen kind of a nice little rally here last few weeks on your live cattle market, but feeder cattle, the steam's just kind of coming out of it a little bit. We're getting into the time of the year where really the only big cattle, feeding cattle, are just big old calves, and they're carrying quite a bit of flesh. They've been heavily supplemented in their feeding programs to get through the cold weather and make it through the storm. You're not seeing any cattle with a lot of condition like your feedlots would really like to buy, with an empty condition and kind of on the thinner side. But at the same time, when you got a big storm coming in, you really don't want any cattle that are very thin at all, because they may not be tough enough to take the storm. Even though your feedlots like to put that flesh on themselves, they're having to buy cattle that are a little fatter than what they really want to start out with. But your fat cattle trade this week, really didn't see much fat cattle trade at all through the week. May have had an after-hours sale on Friday. We'll find out next week really how that developed. Had just a few sales in the lower 130s up in the northern plains. It didn't establish a market by any means. Remember last week in the southern plains we had a top of 138. We did hear of some 138 offers there on Thursday, but your feedlots turned them down. They felt like they was going to get $1 or $2 more, and they really had a good reason to think that they would get that. But your dress trade, we saw a little bit of dress trade in the northern plains on Friday there at 210, which would be on the weak side, $1 to $2 lower. Your box beef cutout values, like we said, were a little bit stronger than what we thought, and your weekly trade there was slightly higher, with choice carcasses ending up at 221.84 on your weekly cutout. That was up 44 cents the previous week. Selects were 217.26, which was up 67 cents. And the reason that was stronger, or else it would have faded more, was because we had an abbreviated kill there, because some of those northern plants were closed down or ran a short schedule. But this week's weekly kill was estimated to be 534,000. compared to 567,000 last week and 546,000 a year ago. Your cash feeder cattle in the sale barns and places like that, they started out the week lower, and a lot of that had to do with the storm too, but it also was seen down the southern plains. But what you see up north is pretty much what you see everywhere else too, because it just backs things up. But a lot of your feedlots that would have liked to have bought some cattle in Nebraska and in the northern part of Kansas and places, they really were scared of what that storm was going to bring. They weren't real fired up to dig in and buy too many cattle. And even if they felt good about buying them, the roads were rough there. We had I-70 and I-80 both closed for a time there early in the week, so they really didn't dig into those cattle. So we started out the week sure steady to $5 lower on feeding type cattle. But as we got through the week, and some of those sale barns had to hold those cattle a day or two, which they never really want to do. Not the sale barns so much, but the buyers hate to leave cattle sitting in a sale barn very long. They get kind of stale, and you're going to have more problems with them if you let them sit very long. You just, well, get them on a truck and get them to where they're going. But with the road conditions the way they were, some of them had to leave them sit for a little bit. But so we did see some firmness return into the market on your feeding cattle later in the week when those roads opened up and some of your northern feedlots needed a few cattle. So it was kind of unevenly steady with that firmness that we saw late in the week. Your calves were kind of all over the place. In the southeast, they had a pretty decent market and showed up to $5 higher and maybe more in spots. But when you get back up in the central parts of the United States there, a lot of that weakness that was seen earlier in the week on your feeder cattle also bled over into your calves. But we're still expecting those calves to really see a jump here as we get closer and closer to spring. And guys are already buying cattle for your Flint Hills. They're buying some calves. They like for those calves to be weighing 6, so they're warming those 5-weight calves up and get them to weighing in the 6s by the time they turn those cattle out, after they get those pastures burn off there in the Kansas Flint Hills and places like that, because they'll really go to town. Those bigger cattle like that's got a little bit background to them, they'll really put the weight on them if they're ready to go, and that green grass tastes awful good to them, and maybe get a 300-pound gain in a season there on a good steer and come off weighing around 9, which is what a lot of them are looking for. You look at some individual quotes there on Cattle Market Central. Your Montana livestock auctioneer in Ramsey had a load of 738-pound steers just after lunch on Friday afternoon. Brought 156.75, and that's a long ways from the major feedlot area. So you put some wheels under those and get them where they're going, and that's a pretty decent price. Get a little bit closer to the 5 areas in Torrington, Wyoming. They had a load of big calves, weighed 670. 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon, bring 175.75. That's pretty much this your cattle market summary for this week from a home office here in Maysville, Missouri. We'll talk to you next week.